Listen only mode.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls. It's the weekly Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific SMB Nation educational webinar. My name is Harry Brailsford. I'm coming to you from a disclosed location. I'm actually on Bainbridge Island. Some of you have reached out and asked, what am I doing and why am I traveling? Well, long story short, I'm basically on a 100-day assignment from Microsoft to spread the good word about Office 365, Windows 8, and devices, and I'm home for a few days to do laundry. This all comes to a crashing in by the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. So, but it's good to be home, and more importantly, it's good to kind of pop on a webinar. It's been a couple weeks. Today's topic, a little bit of housekeeping. As always, be sure to use the chat feature to ask your questions. We also love your feedback. You'll receive a follow-up email with any pertinent links and further information. So as always, I'll kind of be in the loop tomorrow with a thank you email from Heather. And be sure to tune in next week and the week after and the week after. A little bit of housekeeping coming up. I'll let Karl, our guest, speak towards his online conference coming up soon. We're getting inquiries about our fall conference. And why we're holding back on specifics right now, folks. There's some very good reasons for that, but do save the date for the last weekend in September at Microsoft Redmond, and we'll have some updates for you shortly about what that looks like. But yes, the fall conference is on, and it's the last weekend of September at Microsoft Redmond, and I guess that's 12 years in a row. Now, with today's topic, I'm just stopping by briefly since I literally just landed late yesterday and have to, quite frankly, go paint the fence and mow the lawn, as they say. But I wanted to get Karl off to a good start. He's discussing a topic near and dear to my heart, which is project management. And, you know, few people know, but that's actually what I studied in grad school at the time, thinking about returning home in construction management with the pipeline and the Alaskan economy. But darn it, I discovered computers along the way. We started using Mac Project and then Primavera and some other project management software, and I decided I like computers better. The good news is, Karl, that major, that discipline transferred 100% to technology. I didn't lose a step.
Yeah.
Project management works with both construction and computers. Karl, good morning, sir. Where are you and what are you wearing?
Oh, well, now let's not get carried away. I'm in Sacramento, California today, so okay. Just like you got to spend some time doing laundry. So.
Well, hey, Karl, I just wanted to pop in and kind of give you a little jump start, but I appreciate you stepping in to have a chit-chat, an academic chit-chat with our audience, and let's catch up soon. It's been too long, sir, and I'm looking forward to that conference at the end of the month. That's going to be cool.
Yes, well, thank you very much, and I appreciate all of your support and having me here and having me on the Emerging Technology Tour and everything. It's been fantastic.
Cool. Okay, have a great show.
Thank you, sir. All righty then. Heather, do you have other housekeeping for folks or instructions?
No, Harry did a great job of covering it, so without further ado, Karl, it's all yours.
Very good. So some of you have probably attended the first in the series. We have a project. I talked about project management and kind of selling the project and so forth. And so now we're going to talk about once you've got the project and you've figured out what you're going to do, let's talk about how you execute it, how you successfully make sure that you do what needs to be done on the project. And there's several pieces to that. One is that you need to make sure you're going to make money. You also want to make sure that you keep it within the guidelines and that you know, there's some certain challenges to successful projects. And so you certainly want to be able to get better and better at what you do all the time. So today we're going to talk about managing the project itself and communicating with clients and with employees and with other technical folks. A little bit about just sort of dealing with all of the personnel who are involved in the project. So the scope of our presentation today is all the things required in execution. And this is actually a poster that I had made. It is hanging on the wall behind me. It sits over Monica's desk as a motivational reminder. You know, the truth is you can have all of the planning you want, and you can be awesome at what you do, and you can have amazing ideas, but at the end of the day, if you don't execute, then having great ideas and having great talent is completely meaningless. You know, it's funny, I always talk to people who are a little bit afraid sometimes to talk about their business, and they say, oh, well, I don't want to give away any of my secret sauce and blah, blah, blah. Well, here's the deal. I have discovered that most people, especially my so-called competition, are never going to execute. They go to conferences and they get home and they don't do anything. They don't make any changes. They learn about things and they don't make any changes. And so obviously if you're on this call, it means that you're motivated to actually execute and make some changes. And that's the thing about project management, is you can have a perfectly designed project, but if you do not follow the plan that you've set forward and execute it flawlessly, then you're going to have problems. So a lot of what we talk about today falls under this big, huge umbrella that everything relies on actually executing the things that you want to do. Now, obviously, as I just said, we want to execute it in a way that we make more money and we can replicate our success. So let's look at some of the details of what that looks like. The only thing you really need to go back and learn from the last presentation that is relevant here is the single most important aspect of project execution is knowing what's inside the scope and what's outside the scope of the project. If you can manage the scope of the project, you can do everything that needs to be done, including make lots and lots of money. So today we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the project scope. So just for those of you who didn't see the last presentation, let me just say there's a lot of things that go wrong with projects, and we all know about them. The number one thing that goes wrong is scope creep, that somebody brings in stuff and they want you to add it to the project, but they don't want to charge you for it. And sometimes it's stuff that you don't expect. You know, they'll say, we need you to set up these 3 computers, and we bought Microsoft Office, so we need that installed. Okay, great. So you get there, there's 3 computers, and there's 14 copies of Microsoft Office, and you're like, hey, what's going on? And they say, well, we said we wanted you to install Microsoft Office. So what they meant is that they've got 14 copies. You've quoted a project that involves installing 3 of them. So that's the kind of thing that, you know, yeah, you can make the argument that you should be able to foresee that, but just human communications being the way it is, you're not going to be able to foresee everything. Or when you show up and they say, as long as you're here, let's go ahead and set up the new printer or switch out the new router or whatever it might be, connect up to the new internet service provider. You know, you've seen it all. Every time you go to a project, there's something where people want to get off task. So we're going to look at how you manage that and keep clients happy. So if you ever take a Microsoft exam, they now have these multi-option answers where you say, okay, the target here, the strategy is to do all of these things are required, and then these things are optional but desired. So which solution gets you all of the required options and as many as possible of the desired options? And you have to sort of figure out what the answer is. And that's a lot of what happens in projects. You have to say, okay, here are the things that absolutely have to happen, and here's the niceties. You know, if we're touching all the desktops, let's see how much cleanup we can throw in, right? That kind of stuff. It would be nice to clean up all the desktops. It's not specifically what you're there for, but you know, it's the kind of thing that is, as you're going along, it might be something that you can do. So once you figure out what's required and what's nice, then you lay out what you're going to do, and you do it in order. Now, when I say do it in order, that means you have to have an order, You have to say, first we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. As technicians, especially if you're really good at what you do, we have this tendency to sit down and start clicking away. You know, there's a problem. Oh, we need to move the Exchange server. Okay, great. Sit down, click, click, click. And that's very frequently not the best solution. The best solution is usually to take stock and figure out what's the best thing to do first. How can you do certain things that will save you trouble down the road? For example, in moving an Exchange system to the cloud, for example. You might want to first go in, archive all the old stuff, and then delete it. And then, one by one, clean up things in all the mailboxes and do it in such an order that when it's time to back up the deleted items and save that off and then empty the deleted items, now you've got a clean PST, but you've got PSTs of even the deleted stuff that you did after you archived it. So there's an order in which you would do this so that you keep a copy of absolutely everything, especially if there are certain clients like attorneys that they want a copy of everything that's ever been done and they don't ever want anything deleted. But this is the way where you can clean up their database, get it under 2 gigs, move it to the cloud, make them happy, and make sure you've got a copy of everything. But that takes planning, and it means that you have to do things in a certain order. If you don't do it in a certain order, then you end up reworking or making a messy collection of PSTs, that sort of thing. You should also have checklists. So for every major stage of a project, there should be at least one checklist. So the stage might be, for example, that you're going to clean up the database. And then the next stage is that you're going to copy out the PSTs, and then you're going to move the PSTs and copy them into the cloud-based Exchange system. Click, click, click. There's a way to do that, and there's an order that makes sense. If you do it more than once, you should have a checklist. And checklists allow you to hand off work to other people. They allow you to get people from your user group or whoever, temporary technicians, to help you out, and so forth. The most important thing you need to do is stay inside the scope and have perfect communication to the extent that that's humanly possible. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at making sure that you have a project lead. And that might be you or your service manager or technician, whoever it is. Somebody has to be in charge of that project. One time I was installing a SAN at the military base at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and there was one person who was in charge of the project, and he was a private. And at one point there was a big argument about what was supposed to be done next, and something wasn't quite right, and so forth and so on. And at the end of the day, there was a major there who wanted something done, and the private was able to say, "I appreciate that, sir, but we're going to do it this other way." And the private had the authority to do that because on that project he was in charge. And so just the way it was structured, kind of doesn't matter whether you're the owner or the service manager or the tech. The person who's in charge of the project gets to make those decisions. So if you trust somebody enough to put them in charge of a project, then you give them the leeway to make sure they do it right. And obviously you're going to guide them and so forth. There are some people who are going to grab the ball and run with it, and there's some people who are going to fall down. And if they fall down, you have to decide whether you're going to replace them or pick them up and set them in the right direction. So you need to build a team of people who can run projects. If you're the only one who can run a project, that's going to lead to some trouble down the road. The other thing that's important is nowhere on this list is the client. The client is not the project manager. The client doesn't get to decide the order in which things are done, whether or not a stage is complete. They don't get to make decisions about the project. That's why they hired you. So it's very important that you take charge and that your company run the project and not let the client run it. So we talked last time about writing a proposal and that we have kind of this internal and external view of the proposal. And for me, I like the internal view to look just like this, except it'll have your numbers on it of what it's going to cost you. But all we care about once it's been approved is that let's say this is an example of a migration of a server migration. So each item on here becomes a stage, and each stage becomes a ticket. So what happens is that when the client approves it, they approve this big block of labor, and we don't break it out for them so they can't say, oh, I'm glad we saved an hour with training, so now we've got an extra hour to spend somewhere else, or maybe we get some money back. You don't want any of that. You just want one big block list of things to do and the dollar amount at the bottom of the page. And once you have that, then the items on this list become the tickets, and you can literally just copy it right from here and say that it is migration project, training, migration project, labor, or discovery, so forth. And so what you do is you create a ticket for each of these major things. Now, one ticket, the training ticket, might have exactly 1 or 2 hours in it, and the server build might have 15. So, you know, you don't have to think of these in terms of being roughly equal. That's not relevant. They're related to the task that needs to be done, not to the amount of time that you expect that they're going to take. So when you take this, you can copy and paste it right into your ticketing system, and I'm going to show you kind of what that looks like in a minute. And it doesn't really matter whether you're using TigerPaw, ConnectWise, Autotask, the same thing applies. So you want to have what's called a closed loop process. And depending on your screen, it may be a little hard to see this graphic on the right, but you're going to get these slides. And so the stages allow you to execute each of these distinct elements that we just saw, and of course it's in order. And you know, how does an ant eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So any project is manageable if you are doing one thing at a time. It's also why having a ticketing system is so useful, is that when you have a ticketing system, then you're able to give a task to a specific technician and say, you know, here, Bob, I need you to go clean up the workstations. Okay, boom. He takes that ticket and he works that ticket and he puts all of his time on that ticket. And then that allows you also to keep the project within scope, and we'll show you how that works in just a minute. But the key to success is that you can divide up the work as needed, and it also allows you to be better at quoting in the future, because if you put all the time against the right ticket, at the end you'll know exactly how much time it took you to move the data, to clean the workstations, to migrate the server, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is, you'll have good time estimates for each of those things. So now this happens to be a screenshot from a specific PSA, but any PSA is going to have essentially the same thing, where you've got your ticket title and a description. And the title begins with migration dash, or whatever the name of the project is. And the first question I'm going to get asked is, do I use the project module in my PSA? And the answer is no. We have used both ConnectWise and Autotask, and in both cases I find it, especially in the SMB space, much easier to manage projects in the ticketing system than in the project module. So that's just the way it is. I actually don't know anybody who uses the project module religiously in either of those programs. So what you do is you give it a title so that you know what the project is, and then just 1 or 2 words, the name of the stage. Then the description is copied and pasted from the quote that you gave the client. And then you put in here the appropriate status, the due date, and then the estimated labor. So whatever it is, when you're done, you've got labor hour estimates that you put in there because you quoted the project based on your estimate it was going to take you, whatever, 10 hours to build the server, 5 hours to migrate the data, 14 hours to clean up the workstation, whatever it might be. So you've got good time estimates for everything. And then it looks like this. You've got a list of all of the tickets for a specific client, And all of the ones related to the migration are now sorted together. And you could even sort them a little better if you wanted to put the stage numbers on there. You could put migration 01 training, migration 02 discovery. And that way they would even sort better than this. But this allows you to instantly see all of the tickets related to that specific project, and then you can get to them. It also means that if you're running a backlog report, you'll be able to know how much labor you've used and how much is left over within the project as a whole, and how that affects your ticketing system as a whole. So the key to success for communication is that you need to use your PSA. And to be honest, if you don't have a PSA, you need one. Even if you're a sole proprietor, in my opinion, you need some place so that you know that every single thing that needs to be done by your company is somewhere. It's written down, it's in a system that it can be assigned to somebody. Even if you don't use it necessarily for time tracking or whatever, there's going to be a place where every single thing lives. If it's an Excel spreadsheet, it better be a pretty fancy Excel spreadsheet. That's all I got to say. PSAs are not that particularly expensive, and they will make you money. So it's within the PSA that you keep notes on the tickets. The statuses of each of your migration projects are there, and so you'll be able to quickly and instantly see that. And then there's stuff that's relevant to the specific project. So, for example, you might put the license keys or the information that's needed for setting up particular software, that sort of thing. If you need to call tech support for something, you'll open another related ticket, and that will all be in the PSA. So it also allows you to hand work off from one person to another. So it's real easy to say, you know, Josh worked on this in the morning and Dan worked on it in the afternoon, but the total number of hours is still within what we had projected for the budget. I'm a real big believer in email templates. A lot of people don't use this, but you know, you can open up an email and you can start writing it and get the text exactly the way you want, and then just go save, and save it as an MSG or a message within a folder. And then when you double click on that, it opens up the message and you can type in the recipient, and it's exactly as it was last time. That is a beautiful way to keep the contacts and the clients informed about what's going on, because you can have templates that say, for example, we're moving to a new ISP on Thursday, and here's the way it's going to go, and you explain it to them so everybody knows. And then, you know, they're going to get an email when this happens. They're going to get an email at this stage, an email at that stage. If you need to interrupt them at their desktops, you tell them that. Whatever it is, there should be regular communication all the way through your project, even if it's a short, a 5-hour project. The clients should know what's going on. Every time there's some big thing that goes on in the news, you hear complaints about people saying they should just tell us what's going on, right? Whether it's a construction accident or an emergency or something went wrong, or if it's just standard operating procedures. You know, they're going to have a parade and they're going to shut down part of the city. They need to tell people what those routes are going to be, right? So we get very frustrated when we think people should communicate with us and they don't. So build communication and email templates into your project, and you can use the same ones. You know, my brother and I wrote this big book on network migrations, and we have all of these email templates that are just stored in our system. So throughout the migration project, we just literally would go copy, paste. You know, you can either paste them from text or save them as messages, but the communication is almost identical project after project after project, and it all has to do with making sure people feel comfortable because they know what's coming, they know what's going on, they know that it's started. If it gets stopped for some reason, they know, you know, they feel informed about what's going on, and that gives them lower stress and a little, you know, friendlier attitude, because all they know is their network is down or they're going to be interrupted. They don't know all the details or why, and you know, you can justify it all you want, but it's much better to just keep them informed. If you tell people, hey, something went screwy and we're going to fix it and we estimate it to be 1 hour, boom, all of their stress gets reduced. It doesn't necessarily go away, but it gets reduced, and it makes it easier for them to manage things. So communication is absolutely paramount. So you also need to have a timeline for as long as you need to get it done properly. So for us, we have checklists that start 3 weeks before the actual migration project. And for some things, it's even longer than that. We've had huge migration projects that have taken months. But whatever it is, again, divide it into stages and make it happen. But there's a list of things that need to get done. You know, in our book, there's no such thing as an emergency migration, right? Emergency migration means that, you know, the building burned down and now you got to put that data on a different server. And that's really disaster recovery, not migration. But if you plan things well enough, there's a list of things. A lot of it is simply communication, but also taking delivery of equipment, building up a server, that sort of thing. There's all kinds of stuff that has to happen before you show up on site. And then you've got the day that things cut over, and then you've got the week after just to make sure that everything's going well. You should have a checklist for every one of these things and what needs to happen on each of those things. And as you can tell, that's just a matter of keeping your ducks in a row. So we have a thing that we call a project binder, and it's really just, it's something that you can throw together. There's nothing, you know, particularly sophisticated about it. It's just a paper binder that's got a list of all of the elements of the project. It's got a definition of each of the stages, what the timeline is, what's going to be done in that, and the kind of the details of what's going on in that. And so again, it's like the big checklist, right? The project binder is a physical thing that you can carry around with you, and it lists all the stuff that's going to happen in that project. So you start with each of the stages, and you say, you know, we're going to build the binder. We're going to define the work. We're going to print out each of those stages, and we're going to put it into the binder. And you could literally just print off your service tickets and put them in the binder. But this is also a place where you know, people are going to have notes and stuff. There's maybe warranty paperwork. There's all kinds of things that can get thrown into a project. And this is the one place where you can keep everything. And then you go through each stage. You go through a stage and you complete it. And then you move to the next step and the next step and the next step. At the beginning of the binder, we have a document that lists everything that's in the binder, and so you know what the status is. You should also use what's called a TSR log, which is Troubleshooting and Repair. TSR log is very simply a log that you put together. It's got the basic information that you're going to be asked if you call tech support, right? What's the system? What's the vendor's name and the service, the warranty information, all that kind of stuff, contact information, whatever it is, so that you can follow through and keep track of everything that's going on. Now for us, a troubleshooting and repair log is used whenever we build a server, just because it's a good idea, because you keep track of exactly what you did and did not do and the order in which you did it. And if anything goes wrong, you're able to track exactly when and where it went wrong and how you fixed it. So for example, one time we were building a server, and it was on a DL580, and it had not yet been, HP hadn't built the Smart Start system for Server 2008 yet, so for Small Business Server 2008. So we had to figure out how to do it. We tried this way and it didn't work, tried that way and it didn't work, tried the other way and it didn't work, finally figured out a way to actually get it installed, and that we were able to write all that out and create a procedure from our troubleshooting and repair log, so that if that system ever crashed and we had to rebuild it, we would have a quick, short, easy way of doing that, and we would know the right way because we kept track of how we fixed that problem in the first place, so now we can fix it again in much more timely manner, because we obviously didn't make a bunch of money horsing around trying to figure out how to get that operating system installed. So that's not something that I would want to repeat. It's only the successful part that I want to repeat. The TSR log allows us to do that. We also, whenever we have any major, like really big thing that we're going to do, we create a TSR log, or if we're stuck. And you can pick the times that make sense for your company, but let's say, for example, if any technician is working on something and making no progress for 30 minutes, if they have no progress for 30 minutes, they need to start a TSR log and they need to call somebody, right? So they might call you, they might call Symantec, Microsoft, HP, whoever, but they can't just sit there beating their head against the wall until they figure it out. And starting the TSR log allows you to escalate trouble tickets with, again, Microsoft, HP, Dell, whoever, much more easily, because once you start talking nerd to nerd and you say, all right, I did this and then I did that, and then that didn't work, so I went back to the original configuration, and you walk them through what you did and didn't do. Then when they go to you and say, okay, turn to page 1 of my level 1 tech support questionnaire, is the machine plugged in? You can say, no, we're not going to do that crap, right? I want to escalate this call to somebody who's going to take me seriously, because I have perfect notes about what we did and did not do, and I know the order of it. It also helps you that when the tech support says, okay, let's walk through this certain thing, you can say, we've already done that, so let's not go do that again. Or the lower level tech had us do that, so please don't make me do that again. And once you have better notes than they have, believe me, they will take you very seriously. It's easier to get an escalated call, and at the end of it, you can staple all that together, stick it in the project binder, and now you know all about what happened at that point in the process. It's also something that you sometimes may be able to create checklists and future procedures based on the notes that you get out of your TSR logs. For us, this is usually a paper thing, so everybody just carries one, and if you need it, you take it out and start using it. And it's always a good thing to keep with your project paperwork. So, a few rules to make projects successful. First one is everybody has to work in real time, and that means they are working on one ticket at a time. They are putting their ticket into the time into the correct ticket, and they have good notes about what they did, and that way you know at a glance who's working on what, and you know how much time they have spent on each piece of the process. So every stage has got an accurate time attached to it. And we're going to talk in a little more detail in a minute, but basically if something is outside the scope, that means you create another ticket. And the beautiful thing about that is that if you create another ticket, what is it? It's not going to start with migration dash. It's going to start with something else, which means it is by definition outside of this project. And the reason that that's important is that if you have to stop this project and go work on something else, and a good example would be that you get there and the UPS is dead, right? And trying to figure out what you're going to do about the UPS in the middle of a migration project is clearly unrelated to the migration project, but it's something that has to be dealt with. So you put the migration project on hold while you figure out what you're going to do with the UPS. And so whatever has to happen there, whether you're switching out a battery or switching out a UPS or whatever, that is time that may be billable, depends on your contract, but it is absolutely outside the scope of the project. And that means the client can't come to you and say, hey, what's up, up with this? I thought this was only going to take 14 hours. And you say, well, we spent 3 hours on something else, and it's in a completely different ticket. So I can run a report about the hours we spent on this, and you'll see that it's outside of this project. So there's nothing that's called fallout in this process. What happens is that at the end of the project you need to do some fine-tuning and so forth. But when you look at this graph, what happens is you work each stage, and then if something's outside the scope of the project, it goes over to the right and it flows down. And then the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. When you have finished all the stages, you are essentially done with everything that you expected to be part of the project. And then you document it. There's only 3 things that can happen to that stuff that comes up in the middle of a project. One is that it's so minor that you just include it. You know, you've got an extra 3 hours on the project and you're basically done, and somebody says, hey, can you help me set up an Outlook signature? You say yes. What the heck? Why not? Second thing that can happen is that it's no longer necessary. And the perfect example is always if somebody was having trouble printing before the project, and now after the project, everything should be working. So that issue should be gone, right? It's no longer needed simply because the project was successful. Or if somebody can't get to the server, well, they better be able to get to the new server or you haven't done your job. So something becomes irrelevant is the second option. And the third option is you say this is not to be included and it's not automatically fixed by the process, so it must be outside the scope of this project. And in that case, a new service request is created, and now you've got a list of those service requests. You've kept the project within scope. You've done the work on the project within the time that you promised, because every time something's out of scope, you stop the clock on the project and you start the clock on something else, and then you go back and start the clock on the project, and that way the project always stays within the allotted time. And so now you've got a long, maybe not long, but anyway, you've got a listed collection of these out-of-scope service requests. And so you take those to your primary contact and you say, this is all billable work, or maybe these things fall into managed services and these things fall into time and materials. Which would you like us to do? And you can do those, but you do it outside the scope of the project. And obviously some of these things are far enough outside the scope that you just separate them to a different day. If it turns out that you really don't have the bandwidth you thought you needed to have and you need to change ISPs, you want to do that either a week before or a week after you switch out the server. Because if you do it on the day you switch out the server or the week that you switch out the server, you've got all kinds of potential problems where what you thought was a problem related to one thing is really a problem related to something else. So separate that out and increase your overall success. So once you're done with all of the stages, then there might be a little fine-tuning, but you're essentially done. When all of those tickets are done and all of the time is put in the tickets and each of the tickets that we started with is closed, then the project is done. And one of the most frustrating things you're ever going to find with clients is they're frustrated when projects never end. Like, my God, this project was supposed to take 3 days and it's been a month. When will it ever end? You will never be in that position again as long as you have a clear definition of the scope and manage your time and manage your work appropriately. Projects can't go on forever. They must come to an end. And a ticketing system almost forces you to do that. And then at the end, of course, you do some client training and you do a final evaluation. So in terms of personnel, it's important to look at who can do what. A well-managed project allows you to put work into the hands of people who are lower skill level, which is to say you don't have to have an MCSE in order to get a lot of things done. It's all about putting the work into the right hands. We love having the salesman help us with desktop migrations because it's just a checklist. He sits down, we put a checklist for every machine, he sits down, writes down the name of the machine and the user, and he proceeds through the checklist. And if he has any stops whatsoever, he just draws a red line and lets us know that either Mike or I are going to go fix that machine and figure out why there was an issue, and he goes on to the next one. He does nothing related to troubleshooting. He has just enough technical skill to go down that checklist. He can click on a box, open a menu, copy something, paste something, right? I mean, there's not a huge amount of skill that's required in a basic desktop migration. So at the end of the day, he'll have 10 machines done. Mike and I have each got 3 because we obviously, we take the hard stuff that he can't do. So we got a ton of work done because he did everything that was super easy. That's the way that you need to allocate resources. And you also need to keep track of everyone's time. Your time, your employees' time, everybody's time. Because at the end of this, you want to be able to know exactly how much time was spent on each stage of the process so that the next time you quote a project, your quotes will become more accurate. After the project is done, you want to evaluate in terms of how you did with execution. It's good to have an evaluation of whether the client's happy. That's all good. But what you care about more than that is, did we execute this appropriately? Did we have the right time estimates? Were we inside the scope of the project? Were we inside the time of the project? Were we profitable? If you use your PSA correctly, you should know the profitability and the billability of every project and every employee. So let's say that your average employee is 60% billable, which means in a 40-hour week, you expect them to work 24 hours, to bill 24 hours worth of labor. So if somebody's 60% billable, and it's a simple calculation. Let's say that you got a flat fee of $5,000 for a server migration. You're expecting it to take 30 hours, right? Well, to get those 30 hours, you're going to have to buy about 45 hours, okay? So that's the way it works. So you take 45 hours times the cost, the true fully burdened cost of that technician, and now you've got an estimate of what it costs you in terms of labor. So, the truth is, on a project like that, you could probably spend 60 hours and still be profitable, but you can't spend 100. So you need to know whether or not your project is profitable. If it's not profitable, this sounds absurd, but stop doing those projects. Either make them profitable or stop doing them, because there's no point in losing money on every project and then trying to make it up on volume, right? So your project should always be more profitable every time you do them, and your estimates should become more accurate, but that requires that everything be in your system. The time has to be in your system, the tickets all have to be straightened out, and the right time has to be placed against the right ticket. So if you are bouncing around, you start to build the server, but then you're going to go, move some data. That's cool. You stop putting your time on the server build ticket and you put your time onto the data move ticket. And you have to be rigorous about that in order to get accurate data at the end. The bottom line is, as we said last time, the scope of the project is the project. So keeping everything inside the scope of the project is the way that you're going to make money. And I always tell people you should get 2 tattoos, one on your left arm, one on your right arm. One says inside the scope of the project, the other one says outside the scope of the project. Those 2 phrases will make you money. When you start talking to clients in terms of, well, we could do this, but it's not inside the scope of the project as we quoted it. We could do that, because it is inside the scope. And you say that several times, and pretty soon clients begin to echo it back to you. And they will say, I was hoping that we'd be able to apply all of those updates to that new line of business application. Is that inside the scope of the project? And once they ask you those questions, they get the concept of a scope of project. You do not have, as Harry was saying at the beginning, you don't have to be an IT person to understand the scope of a project, right? It may be a big, broad, amorphous term, but people understand that there is a limit to this project. It is not the big box of technology and you walked in and opened it up and they can throw in anything they want. It's a specific thing, but you have to be the policeman. The client will always ask you to do more work and throw it in as part of the project. That's their job. That's how they save money, because they're paying a flat fee and now they're going to get you to do as much work as they can. Clients have this vision that if you've got 2 technicians at their office for 2 days, they can have them do anything they want because that time's already paid for. And that is absolutely not the way that you stay profitable. You stay profitable by making sure that your technicians are working on this project. And if they're doing something else, then the time stops on this project and it starts on something else, whether that's managed service ticket or a billable ticket, but it is not this project. This project stays within scope, on time, and on budget because you managed it and managed the scope. That is what I have for today. Let me just give you a quick note. My online conference that Harry mentioned is June 24th, 5th, and 6th, and you can get 20% off, which is a spectacular deal if you use the code SMBNation20, and I would love to have you join us for that. I actually haven't even added it to the website yet, but the folks from Zinstra are going to join us, and so if you saw the Zinstra webinar, you'll get a much deeper dive into the kind of stuff that they're doing. They'll be at the conference. I got some amazing speakers, including the best-selling business author ever in the history of the world, Michael Gerber, the author of The E-Myth Revisited, is going to be the keynote speaker at this conference, and you will not have another opportunity to see him anywhere in the SMB space, maybe ever, but certainly not this year. And he's one of my absolute heroes, and I would love to have you join us and listen to the words of Mr. Michael Gerber of the E-Myth Revisited. So, having said all that, I am ready to take any questions.
Great. Thanks, Karl, and thanks for letting us know about your conference. I know a lot of the guys on here are really excited about it. I know especially Harry, who's presenting on it, and he's excited about it as well. We do have a couple of questions. The first one is, how do you handle or communicate issues that occur as a result of something done in the project that was unforeseen?
Something that was done that was unforeseen. Well, I'm a real fan of just being blatantly honest. I have just a horror story from when one time I broke the drive as I was putting it into the machine. I literally shoved it in and broke a piece off that was sticking out of the drive. So, and there's, at that point it's like, okay, so you need to communicate to the client, deep breath, okay, here's where we are, this thing went wrong, and never go to them with just the problem. You got to go to them with the answer, which is, we're going to stop the migration, or whatever it might be. We're on hold for right now. Here's what's going to happen next. Again, that communication, that here's what's going to happen next, is a very powerful tool. We normally, obviously, we don't expect things to go wrong, and they normally don't go wrong. But when stuff goes wrong, we just have to manage it. We actually have a saying that we train our technicians on, which is, we're going to start this project. Something's going to go wrong. I don't know what it is, but I know that we're going to fix it. We've never not finished a router configuration. We've never not finished building a server. We've never not finished moving an ISP. So the question is just, what are your resources? And it falls into the category of slow down and get more done. Slow down and just sort of focus on what exactly needs to be done and what the next steps are. So, and if that doesn't answer the question, maybe they'll ask another.
Thanks, Karl. We have another question. I believe this attendee is a little bit new to the industry and a little bit new to the whole process. They were wondering if you could go or give a little refresher as to what PSA stands for and why exactly they would want to use one of those.
All right, I'm sorry. So a PSA is a professional services automation tool, and it's basically it's like a ticketing system. The biggies are Autotask, ConnectWise, and TigerPaw. And basically a PSA is a system in which you create your service tickets. So let's say you've got a client, you put in all of your clients, all of your contracts, your service tickets, and information about each of your employees. So now you've got all the pieces of your business, right? You've got the contract piece, you've got the clients, you've got the employees. So now clients can come in and create tickets. And again, a project can be super small. A project can be installing a new printer, right? That can be a project. So you've got a ticket in there that says this work needs to be done, and we know which desktop and which client and how much time we estimate, and we know whether it's billable or not billable. All that is tracked in a PSA. And then you've got employees, and you send an employee to do it. The employee literally opens that ticket, puts in their notes about what they did, and then they close it up. And when they close the ticket, then we know that that job is done. So it allows us to track everything that's going on. And all the stuff that I talked about in terms of billability and profitability, that comes from putting information into your ticketing system and then running the appropriate reports to get it out. Boy, these guys should all pay me a bunch of money, shouldn't they? Netwise, Autotask, Tiger Paw.
Oh, great. Thanks, Carl. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and do a last call for questions here in the last 5 minutes of the webinar. And then we'll let everyone get back to their busy day.
I will put out another commercial, which is I have a class that I'm teaching on project management that starts, I think it's June 16th. And so if folks want to email me or go to my blog and get on my mailing list, I would very much appreciate anybody taking a look at that class.
Great. Oh, we do have one final question. How do you measure the happiness of the client after a project has been completed?
I take them to lunch. So that's actually a really great question, because I've had more than one case where I thought a project was flawless, and when I ask the client, like, so how are you feeling about all this? They say, well, we didn't expect, these problems. And you say, well, wait a minute, what problems? And their perception is not the same as our perception. We thought we had something flawless, but somebody couldn't print on day 2, and the boss thought, because what the person reported to them was the system's down and it's been down all day. Well, they weren't able to print because they were out of toner, but that's got nothing to do with us installing a new ISP, right? So when you are done, you need to just literally talk face-to-face with the client. I've rarely gotten a client to fill out a form and put anything meaningful on it in terms of an evaluation, but they will talk to you face-to-face and tell you what their impressions are. And you'd be amazed that sometimes when you think something has gone perfectly and they think it's got problems. Again, it's not their job to know technology, so that face-to-face communication is absolutely the best way to get it done.
Great. Thanks, Carl. That's all the questions we have, so I'll let everyone get back to their day. Thanks again, Carl, for giving a great presentation. And
great. Thank you, and thanks for having me. I always enjoyed doing work with you guys.
Yeah, same here. Okay, thanks, everyone. Look for an email from me tomorrow morning with a follow-up link and the slide deck. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.